and most importantly to America's small businesses. One thing you might not know when you think about the hotel industry is that actually 2/3 of hotels, because we're the franchise model, are considered small business. These are small business owners who live in your communities. They employ people in your communities. That same survey of folks found that 70% of respondents stated that when they think about jobs and opportunity inside the travel and tourism space, they think first about hotels and lodging. And 9 out of 10 mayors that were surveyed said that their communities would benefit from more hotels. So now here we are 4 years later, during a time in which all of us are trying to get people to come back into our city centers and our downtowns, and this message of the importance of hotels still rings true. So now we're here today, though, to talk about a very important issue that's shaping communities across this country and really the future of our planet, and that is sustainability. First, I'd like to thank our friends here at the Capitol Hilton for hosting this wonderful event, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors for having their event here at this Hilton Hotel. This is a perfect example of a partnership, and it's a partnership through Hilton that has resulted in an event that has a carbon neutral footprint. Our industry has taken significant steps in reducing food and plastic waste and a number of initiatives to reduce water usage and food waste. And all of this while still providing the clean and safe environment that you expect here at your hotel stay. In addition to that, the food you're eating is also locally sourced and sustainably grown. Now, many of you have seen in your own cities how partnerships with the hotel industry can strengthen all of your goals, including our shared ESG goals. Our No Room for Trafficking campaign has become an industry standard across the private sector in finding ways to stop human trafficking. Our DE&I efforts have opened doors to hundreds of thousands of people in our industry, no matter about race, ethnicity, or gender. And many of you have worked with us on all of these. The issue we're going to be talking about today, though, is how we make our communities cleaner and healthier for the long term. Now, we've been excited to take the next step in this sustainability journey with the recent launch of our industry-wide sustainability effort called Responsible Stay. Responsible Stay, for the first time ever, is uniting our entire industry around a set of standards and goals that are meant to focus on energy efficiency, waste reduction, water conservation, and responsible sourcing. Now, our conversation today with these two fine mayors outlines how the critical partnerships we have between cities and the private sector can reach many of these goals. So the mayors I'm here with today have already been introduced, Mayor Hancock from Denver and Mayor Suarez from Miami. They are both leaders on this issue of sustainability. They are working every day to make sure that they are helping their local communities, the economies in their communities, while also providing for a sustainable future. So, Mr. Mayors, thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So you were chosen because you're both great mayors, but you're also chosen because you have sustainability challenges from two distinctly different places in the United States. Mayor Suarez, you are dealing with rising sea levels.
Sure.
Mayor Hancock, you're dealing with not enough water falling out of the sky.
Right.
So let's start with Mayor Suarez. You have done a lot in and around sustainability. This is a challenge that Miami faces. It is, as you well know, because you're helping lead the effort, one of the fastest growing cities in America. People are coming, business is booming. How can you reach the sustainability goals while also protecting the economy in your city?
I think in two ways. One is we have a mantra where the environment is the economy. For too long, there has been a sentiment in this country where you have to pick one or the other. You either choose the environment or you choose the economy, and they're sort of antagonistic forces. And that's not how we feel. We get a tremendous amount of ecotourism. Our Everglades, which provide our potable water and our drinking water, are also massive revenue generators for our city. Our bay, the same. So we think that there has to be a harmony and a metamorphosis in terms of how we create jobs, have a resilient economy. But I think we're 8th in the country in green jobs, in the green economy. So to us, there isn't a separation. There is a linkage. And I think obviously when you think about the existential threats, right, and three that I can just think off the top of my head, hurricanes, what we call king tide flooding, which is essentially it's dry and water comes up, so he can't get water down. Our water comes from the bottom up. Right. And then, of course, what we call rain bombs, which are actually the opposite again of what's happening in Denver, which is excessive rain in a very short period of time that overwhelms our drainage systems. So those are the kinds of phenomena we're dealing with. And we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in our infrastructure, understanding that we have to be partners with the private sector, like you said, and do what we need to do in the public sector side to make sure that their private sector investments are safe.
Quick follow-up on that. How do you convince the private sector that, look, we have a challenge, we can't handle it ourselves, we're going to be part of the solution, but we've got to have you as part of the solution as well? How has that conversation gone?
Fortunately or unfortunately, it's not too difficult when you see phenomena like Hurricane Dorian or Hurricane Ian, which come and just destroy someplace. I think it becomes very real. We passed our resiliency bond the November after Hurricane Irma in Miami. So the fact that there was an event, that had 5 to 7 foot storm surge was very, very much on the consciousness of voters when they went in to decide whether they wanted to tax themselves, which is something that I can tell you Miamians do not like to do.
Yeah. Who does like to do that? But no. I know Miamians don't like to do that.
No, certainly not.
Mayor Hancock, again, different situation. You're dealing with droughts, but you also started a couple of years ago, we were talking backstage, with a law called the Green Roofs Law,
right,
which sounds great, probably works great, but you had to make sure that you're working with the private sector, particularly hotels in our case, to make sure that this can actually be implemented.
Yeah, the Green Roofs initiative that passed in Denver really started as a community effort, community grassroots effort from some advocates and activists in sustainability. They petitioned and got onto the ballot. It passed, and what it did was required commercial owners to have a green space or green roof in their facilities, which could have been an enormously costly law in Denver. Right concept, but really the implementation, operations, and the impact not really thought about as the activists brought it forward. So what happened is once it passed, we sit down with the private sector, commercial owners, many in the hotel hospitality industry, and we work together to come up with a concept with the activists who petitioned onto the ballot to come up with a strategy that worked. Because the reality is we don't want to close our hotels, we don't want to close our restaurants, we don't want commercial buildings to close, and we don't want to freeze development in our city. And so we had to come up with a strategy that made sense while at the same time meeting our sustainability objectives that were enumerated as part of the initiatives. Hotels were wonderful because if you are required to have a green roof, well, what does that mean? You can come up with a sustainable roof material and stand on your feet. Or, I mean, you can also turn it into an amenity in your hotel, a rooftop amenity that is sustainable and where people can be entertained and can entertain themselves. So it was a real opportunity for us.
I've been to Denver many times, and the rooftop bar is a very exciting place.
Very exciting place.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. I want to follow up because this is an interesting situation that you faced with, you had activists on one side who were attempting to do the right thing. You have a law that goes into effect, and now you're faced with, I got to make this actually work. It sounded great on paper, but I got to make this work. How do you, again, bridge that gap between the folks who appear to be on opposite sides of an issue to all reach the same goal?
You know, you asked Mayor Suarez how you bring the private sector along in these type of initiatives. I think there's a value in doing with and not to. And unfortunately, what activists tend to do, and it's one reason why they typically don't make very good elected officials, is because, and this is not a knock on them, is that they're so committed and passionate about what they want to push forward, they don't think about the important step of process. Process being inclusive of everyone who might be impacted by the decision. And so you've got to be willing to do with early on and not to someone in part of the process. And unfortunately, this was a do to, and when it happened, all hell broke loose. And then we had to bring everyone to the table and say, let's figure this out going forward, because the public did pass it. And in Denver, we have a law that after 6 months an issue passes, City Council can come back and amend it so that it works better once we learn, some of the challenges.
That is a great law. That should be replicated elsewhere. Yeah. Mayor Suarez, from your experience as a local leader, what barriers do you think we still face in getting the public and private sector to come together on sustainability challenges? Because sometimes, you think about taxes, you pass a tax policy, boy, as soon as it's implemented, things start changing, right? People make decisions. With sustainability, the efforts you're making today may not be seen for another generation. So how do you get those folks to come together?
I like the way the mayor characterized it, not doing something to someone, but doing something with someone. Government should be a facilitator. We should be a planner, right, in the sense that we should help bring on these new technologies and make them part of our fabric, even at the regulatory level. For example, one of the things we did was we required new buildings to have a certain amount of their parking spaces be electric vehicle ready. And that's just something we think is good policy. We think it's forward-looking. We also don't think it's sort of the kind of unfunded mandate that would destroy development, right? We had buy-in from the development community. In fact, I would argue that the development community probably goes further because the market is probably going to be further than what we require. But I think as a benchmark, it sets a minimum requirement, and it also articulates your strategy, right? We want to be a resilient city. We want to lean into this moment and signal to the world that if you come to Miami, we expect you to understand this is part of our culture and part of how we want to create a sustainable future for our children and our grandchildren.
Before we continue, we have a quick video we want to play about the things that we're doing in the hotel industry I mentioned a moment ago with responsible stay. And then I want to get your comments on working with certain private sector industries to help further this cause. If we could play that video quickly.
Home is the place where our life's journey begins. It's where we plan our next adventure and where we rest when we return. But home is more than just a place. It's people. The people who make it possible to dream big, travel often, stay responsible, and make sustainable choices. Choices we make to protect our home and our future. Home is not just where we live. It's what we live for. It's who we live for. It's the places we stay to help reduce waste, conserve water, and protect this beautiful place that we all call home. Together, we're creating a more sustainable future that starts with a more responsible stay.
So, Mayor Hancock, we were also talking backstage, and you told me about your sustainability fund that Denver now has. Tell us a little bit about that and how those resources will be implemented in working with the private sector.
We have 2 years ago, the people of Denver passed a sales tax increase, and that 0.1% goes to support our sustainability efforts. And so today we generate between $40 and $45 million a year to help Denver combat climate change. And I'll tell you how that came about, doing with and not to. There was a city councilman who was very passionate about sustainability efforts, and I absolutely love his passion, energy, but he was about to propose an energy tax in Denver where you would tax the use of your energy. He would tax the use of energy based on what you use in your home. And I just brought him in my office and said, have you thought about Miss Jones down the street who's 75 years old, who's barely making it, and all of a sudden you're going to put a tax on her energy use. If she's on an oxygen tank, now she's using more energy than I would. And so this is a regressive tax. So how do we help work with all sectors, bring them to the table, and propose a more appropriate strategy going forward? And we brought in AARP, we brought in senior organizations, we brought in low-income communities, public housing, and they developed a strategy, this task force developed a strategy that would create a sales tax that is also still regressive, but less onerous and less impactful than an energy tax. And we $45 million, and most of the money goes to help low-income families go from maybe natural gas to electric appliances and things of that nature.
Fantastic. We've got just a minute left. I want to ask each of you the same question. What does the sustainable future in your city look like, and what are you most excited about?
Oh, wow, there's so many things. I mean, from rooftop solar to electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. I think the sky's the limit. Certainly carbon neutrality is achievable, and certainly in my lifetime. And I think, if not carbon positivity, and I think reversal. I don't know who was the one that was saying, I don't know if it was somebody in the last couple of days, we're talking about sustainability is at some level accepting mediocrity, right? Because it's saying, or mitigation is at some level accepting mediocrity, right? We're not going to make things worse. I think we have our responsibility to make things better, yes. Right? It's to go further. And I think, I think as the next generation comes, which has prioritized this issue, you're going to see technology lean into how do we make things better, not just how do we just neutral. We're gonna try to make things better and make our planet more regenerative and sustainable.
Yeah, I think the alarms have been sounded much louder recently in terms of the urgency of the moment with regards to climate change. And in Denver, similar to Miami, I think you're going to see this electrification revolution really take off. Like those of us who are maybe been slow walking the installation and build out of electrification infrastructure better get moving. I'm pushing my staff to partner. We're going to make a huge announcement later on today with Hertz in terms of proliferating more electrification infrastructure in the city of Denver. We got to push those things and we got to make sure you guys are into DEI. I call it equity, diversity, and inclusion, EDI. We got to make sure that whatever we do, that is equitable. Just because we have to move with a sense of urgency doesn't mean we can leave. We can leave, or we should leave people behind because they can't afford to be a part of that revolution. We got to think as we implement to do with them and not to them, and make sure they were brought along as well.
Amen.
Well, gentlemen, you represent two of America's finest cities, the world's finest cities, with some great hotels. People love to come visit your cities. So keep up the great work, and thank you for what you're doing on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Chip.
Humming right along. Now allow me to introduce our next speaker, a good friend of America's mayors and the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Alejandro Mayorkas, also Cuban, by the way. I'm sure he loves his Miami Cuban coffee. He is the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Secretary Mayorkas understands the role that mayors play in ensuring the safety and security of their cities. Secretary Mayorkas and his department are responsible for addressing many of our most pressing issues, securing our ports and entry points, responding to the influx of migrants along the southern border, overseeing the resettlement of Ukrainian and other refugees in our country, responding to hurricanes, floods, and other natural disasters, protecting us from terror threats, and helping us to defend from cybersecurity attacks, including malware attacks and interrupt vital services, compromise our security, and cost billions of dollars. Oh, man, that feels heavy. Please join me in welcoming our Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas.
Good morning, and thank you. The Department of Homeland Security was created nearly 20 years ago in the aftermath of September 11, 2001, with a mission to safeguard the American people and our way of life from the threat of foreign terrorists, individuals abroad radicalized by a foreign terrorist ideology who sought to enter the United States and do us grave harm. Over the course of the next 10 to 12 years, as the terrorism threat evolved, our focus increasingly became drawn to the homegrown violent extremist, the individual already resident here who was radicalized to violence by a foreign terrorist ideology. Today, one of the most significant terrorism threats we face is posed by lone offenders and small groups of individuals who commit acts of violence motivated by a range of ideological beliefs or personal grievances. Of these actors, domestic violent extremists represent one of the most persistent threats to the United States. These individuals are often radicalized online and look to conduct attacks with easily accessible weapons. The evolution of the terrorism threat does not mean that the threat of yesterday no longer exists. Tragically, we see new forms of terrorism and targeted violence emerge as old forms prove persistent. That stark reality was evident this past New Year's Eve in New York City, when, motivated by Islamic extremism, a 19-year-old individual attacked 3 police officers with a machete. While the threat of terrorism and targeted violence has evolved, different types of threats have emerged and pre-existing challenges have become more acute. 20 years ago, the threat of cyber attacks was not uppermost in our minds. Yet our world and our lives today are far more interconnected than they were in 2003. And with that advance has come increased risk. We have seen schools, hospitals, law enforcement agencies, water systems, and elections targeted by cyber criminals and adverse nation states. Our homes and our lifestyles are increasingly reliant on connected technology, from our phones and computers to our appliances and cars. The need, therefore, for personal and collective cybersecurity is absolute. Earlier this past December, individuals attacked an electric substation in Moore County, North Carolina, knocking out power for tens of thousands of residents. Less than 1 week later, an unrelated attack was reported on an electric substation in South Carolina. On December 25th, on Christmas Day, 4 electric substations in the state of Washington were attacked, leaving 18,000 people without power. Our nation's critical infrastructure is increasingly under attack, and we must prioritize its protection and be vigilant in doing so. When I addressed you last year, I spoke of the unprecedented severity and increasing frequency of extreme weather events, noting the commendable work of Mayfield, Kentucky Mayor Kathy Stewart Onan in response to a tornado that demolished the homes and buildings throughout her city. This past week has seen atmospheric rivers cause floods, evacuations, and deaths in California, and tornadoes ripped through Alabama and Georgia. In addition to combating these threats, the Department is also working, of course, to secure our borders. The challenge of migration is not unique to the United States, nor to the border communities that confront it every day. Around the world, there are more displaced people than at any time since World War II. Mass migration has gripped our hemisphere. There are 2.5 million Venezuelans now living in Colombia and 1.5 million in Peru. Brazil and Chile are hosting more than 350,000 Haitians, and the number of displaced Nicaraguans in Costa Rica has more than doubled in the last 12 months alone. The threats and the challenges we face are evolving, increasingly diverse and dynamic. Yet, we can meet this moment if and only if we work together. Your leadership is vital not only to the prosperity of your cities, but also to their fundamental security. Our Department of Homeland Security is fundamentally a department of partnerships. To address the threat of domestic violent extremism or other forms of targeted violence, our grant programs provide funding across all levels of government and to our non-governmental partners. Grant funds help law enforcement agencies increase their intelligence and information sharing capabilities and strengthen their terrorism prevention activities. They help harden cities and the nonprofit organizations within them. For example, our nonprofit security grant program provides support for physical security enhancements to nonprofit organizations that are at high risk of terrorist attack. Our Center for Prevention Programs and Partnership, or CP3, provides funds to establish or enhance capabilities to prevent targeted violence and terrorism, while also sharing prevention programs and intervention models to assist individuals who are exhibiting signs of radicalizing to violence. One of our most critical missions of the department is to provide intelligence and information to the broadest audience at the lowest classification level possible. We've released more than 100 intelligence products over the past 2 years, and we actively share information about threats across all levels of government through our more than 130 intelligence officers deployed across the country who sit side by side with your law enforcement professionals to share information on a real-time, daily basis. To address the cybersecurity imperative, our Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, as it is commonly known, has advisors in each state to assess one's systems and make recommendations to strengthen them, teams that are dispatched to analyze and remediate intrusions, and a new grant program to provide funding to help build your city's cybersecurity regime. Our critical infrastructure faces risk not only from cyber attacks, but also from physical attacks, as I mentioned earlier. CISA's advisors help government and critical infrastructure owners reduce vulnerabilities through assessments, training, and other resources. To prevent, protect against, respond to, recover from, and prove resilient to extreme weather events and other natural disasters, FEMA is on the ground, in communities, there with you to provide disaster relief. We need to work together to respond not only to the emergency of the moment, but to understand the evolving risk landscape and strengthen our communities to be more resilient. Last year, the Building Resilience Infrastructure and Communities program saw a twofold increase in available funding to $2.3 billion. This funding helps harden communities against the adverse impacts of climate change. We're executing a comprehensive strategy to secure our borders and build a safe, orderly, and humane immigration system. Working within a broken system in desperate need of legislative reform, 2 weeks ago, we announced new lawful pathways for non-citizens seeking relief in the United States, accompanied by a consequence regime for those who do not avail themselves of those processes. Since then, encounters from the targeted countries have dropped significantly. FEMA is providing emergency food and shelter program funds to help cities around the country recover or defray the costs of non-citizen arrivals. CBP and ICE are working closely with cities to share information and coordinate the disposition of non-citizens in immigration enforcement proceedings. We are also protecting the integrity of the American workplace, the rights of workers, and the right to fair competition. This past Friday, we announced that non-citizen workers who are victims of or witnesses to the violation of labor rights now can access a streamlined and expedited process to obtain protection from retaliatory action if they are part of a labor enforcement investigation. Critically, this includes investigations by state, county, and municipal agencies. We welcome partnership with your labor enforcement agencies to ensure vulnerable workers are aware of the protections available to them and predatory employers are held accountable. We are here to partner with you, to provide you with the information, training, funds, and other resources you need to protect the residents whose security and well-being are our collective responsibility. We need to be equipped to overcome the challenges that are upon us, plan for what tomorrow will bring, and protect the residents of our communities across this great country. We make the greatest difference in the lives of the people we serve when we all work together. It is my hope that you will know our Department of Homeland Security to be a trusted partner in your vitally important leadership, just as we see all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas. We will now hear about what we can do working with the private sector and our partners to ensure safety at significant public events. Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego and Verizon Frontline President Maggie Halbach will discuss the importance of coordination and communication to community safety before, during, and after such events. Verizon Frontline has been working with Phoenix area first responders for nearly 2 years to ensure that they have the mission-critical communication capabilities they'll need for next month's Super Bowl. Ms. Halbach and Mayor Gallego, we look forward to your discussion on this important topic, and please start by telling us who will be at the Super Bowl.
Good morning. It is so great to be with you all, and it's incredibly humbling to follow Secretary Mayorkas. So, keeping with the theme of public safety, I want to introduce myself really quickly and just say that not only do I lead our Verizon Frontline organization, which is a dedicated group that is solely focused on public safety at the federal, state, and local level, and I am very proud of the 30-year partnership that we have had with our first responder community in partnering to understand how technology and communications can actually enable safe communities and not only keep our communities safe, but also keep our first responders safe. And keeping with that partnership theme, I'm very proud to be sitting next to this fabulous woman, Mayor Gallego. Not only is she the second Phoenix female mayor, but she is also one of the youngest mayors of a major city and has been an incredible, inspiring leader in bringing not only economic development and technology development to the greater Phoenix area, but she also has been focused on sustainability, which sometimes, as we've heard, can appear to be in cross purposes with one another. And I also had the pleasure of being with Mayor Gallego back in December when we hosted a series of innovation demonstrations to showcase the power of 5G. Verizon and Verizon Frontline really feel like 5G continues to provide the high quality, reliable connectivity with very, very high speeds and lower latencies that really start to create new ways of ensuring that our communities remain safe. So, Mayor Gallego, my first question is, can you talk a bit about why you've placed such an important emphasis on technology within the city of Phoenix and how that prioritization has helped your public safety agencies, not only within Phoenix, but also the greater Phoenix MSA?
Absolutely, and I think it is important to recognize as we host Super Bowl, there are many cities that come together. There are 5 mayors here who are all busy planning for Super Bowl to host. And then I understand there's at least 6 mayors here who are convinced their team will be coming to visit us. It's now mathematically impossible that the home team will win, so we'll look forward to welcoming the mayors who are going to be joining us and making sure that you are safe in our communities. As soon as a community gets the bid, we start working together to make sure that we can have a safe event. It is a special national security event, so we know that it is one of the times when the world is watching us, and we want to make sure that our residents and visitors are safe. The Super Bowl is viewed in more than 130 countries, and we really know that it is a time when the United States can show what we are able to do. For us, the ability for our first responders to communicate is essential. With so many people coming into our communities, we know there'll be things that are not perfect, and we need to be able to respond and explain as well as possible. Verizon has a long-term partnership with public safety, and actually our former fire chief now helps them develop their product line, so we know we can be able to share what is happening. We do a lot of very large events in the greater Phoenix area. We will have Final Four. We've done a lot of national championships. This is my second Super Bowl as an elected official, and we really pride ourselves on having safe events. There's always bumps, but again, when everyone is able to communicate, we can respond more effectively.
Absolutely. Technology is one of the pieces of the puzzle when we're talking about these large-scale events. The ability to communicate. I was actually speaking with someone last night about the complexity of actually just providing ubiquitous coverage within a stadium like we have at State Farm Stadium in Phoenix. But we also have the Waste Management Open occurring that same weekend. And so when we think about how did your team prepare for the tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of people that will descend upon Phoenix. This is a great time to showcase that, but if you could talk a little bit about how you've been preparing for that.
So we have about 50 city employees who have been coordinating regularly with meeting more and more frequently the closer we get to the game. We work very closely with our neighboring jurisdictions, such as Glendale, which will be home of the big game. We have a lot of the public and free events in our community, and so we need to work particularly hard to make sure that we can succeed in those, and those can be some of the most complex, especially when you have large movements of people all at once. We expect the day after the Super Bowl to be the busiest day ever for our airport. We expect the day before the Super Bowl to be the busiest day ever for our downtown. And we want people to have a great experience. This week, the big Super Bowl 57 letters go up at our big downtown park. We want everyone visiting to be able to take their Phoenix selfie. We're hoping for good weather so that we can sort of show off what we have to offer in February. And so we need Verizon to be there to upload those photos as quickly as possible. And we've been working together now for months and months to really upgrade the 5G canopy and make sure that we have that great connectivity. We think of ourselves as a technology-forward city. We'll be the first Super Bowl host community where you can arrive at our airport and take an autonomous electric vehicle to our downtown. So you can sit in the back seat, no one's in the front seat, and the steering wheel turns itself. It's not for everyone, but I love it. That takes a lot of 5G infrastructure, and that does not happen overnight. So our autonomous vehicle partner, Waymo, has been investing. Verizon is our lead technology partner for the Super Bowl host committee. All of that takes a long time to make sure we are ready for more than 100,000 people, perhaps at once, who we hope are all having a good time and want to be on their phone. And at the same time, our first responders need to be able to connect and communicate.
I think that really speaks to the partnership. You know, Verizon has spent over $175 billion since 2000 upgrading the network. And in the city of Phoenix and the Phoenix metro area, we have invested over $100 million incrementally as we were leading up to the Super Bowl and Waste Management Open period, that week-long period that we anticipate before and after those events. And so what role do partners from the public sector play, like Verizon Frontline, like Waymo, in preparing for an event like the Super Bowl or the Waste Management Open?
So our private sector partners are force multipliers. There are assets that Verizon will have in place that we hope not to need, but we're glad they're there just in case. So Verizon has a mobile command center that helps us with communications if we particularly have a major event. It has a great nickname. It's called Thor, the mobile command center. I'm a mother of a 6-year-old, and so there is a small part of me that wants to be able to call Thor just so I can impress my son. But as I understand it, one only calls Thor if it is a very significant event. But again, we prepare for so many different scenarios which we hope not to need. Our airport is working very closely with our partners there to make sure there's more flights than ever and that we can have a great experience for people who will be visiting us. In an example of really good worrying, we have bought our first ever de-icing equipment for the airport.
Just in case.
Just in case, which I'm convinced whoever succeeds Mayor Hancock will be calling up to offer unused de-icing equipment to Denver in 2 years. But again, we're just trying to think about everything that is possible. We also want to be able to showcase what we're doing. So Verizon has a 5G Innovation Center at Arizona State University in Tempe, where they're really working with us on advanced technology and the workforce of the future. They have a partnership with our Phoenix Suns at the arena, which will have a lot of the great concerts, and so we're going to be able to try to show that we're on the forefront of AI and again with 5G. And so we hope to really have a great experience and show we're willing to take some risks. As a mayor, I know when you do things like autonomous vehicles. It will never be 100% perfect, but we're hoping to have a great experience and show that we're willing to take some risks, and we're a city that's on the cutting edge. Although we're the 5th largest city in the country, sometimes we need to tell our story more successfully, and particularly on the international level. So this will be a chance for us, we hope, to say we care about sustainability, we care about public safety and technology.
And what Mayor Gallego is talking about with Thor, and actually Thor has Thor's hammer, which is a tow behind. It actually is an acronym, and it stands for something. It's called Tactical Humanitarian Operation Response. It was actually deployed for its first foray down to Quantico when we were welcoming the Afghan refugees. It actually held up very, very admirably in Hurricane Ian recovery. It was deployed on Fort Myers Beach as we were working with Lee County Sheriff to restore service down there and help assist them with their search and rescue. And so, to Mayor Gallego's point, part of making sure that the partnership is really vibrant is preparing and planning together. Verizon has many years of preparing for these Super Bowl events and big events like this. We have over 700 deployable assets, not all of them as excitingly named. We often call them farm animals because they go off of cows and colts and those kinds of things. So we are big fans of Avengers because these deployable assets come in when we have those situations that we've planned for. We hope we don't need to use them, but it is always good to know that they are available. The other thing that we have done in support of the city of Phoenix is deployed a network command center. And that network command center is in place, it's been running, and it is there to ensure that we have all sectors of the environment, this very, very large geographically spread event, and we can validate the performance level so that our first responder communities that receive priority and preemption on the network have the best possible experience to ensure that they can do their job, and the fans in the stand never know what was going on behind the scenes, because that's what's about making the end user experience so high quality, is ensuring that they don't ever see it. It's kind of like the swan that's floating along the lake and the little legs are paddling underneath. You never see those little legs, you just see this beautiful, elegant event going off without a hitch. So Mayor Gallego, with our final question in our last 2 minutes, what are you personally most excited about with this upcoming event for the city and for the visitors that will be coming to the city?
With Super Bowl comes 5,000 credentialed media from all over the world, and I hope we can really showcase the greater Phoenix area and tell our story. We're trying to prepare and tell media coming from Germany what are our partnerships with German companies and why they might want to invest. We've prepared documents about some of our historic buildings, and we're hoping to tell media that are interested in history about what we have in Phoenix. We're the home of the tallest container storage housing project, and we're telling architectural publications that we're doing some neat, innovative things in that area. So I'm very bullish on Phoenix, but I hope we can maybe raise the profile a little bit while we have some spotlight on our community.
And Mayor Gallego is an amazing proponent for bringing investment into the city of Phoenix, and we want to ensure, as a partner to Phoenix, that we can demonstrate that Phoenix can be the golden city on the hill. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Gallego.
Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Ryan Whalen, Senior